The NFL draft is finally here. So what will happen beginning Thursday night? I have trades up, trades back, and adding a Pro Bowler. Jenna thinks defense first, and has Dan gone to his dark side on the running backs? That's all coming up on this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus podcast.
Okay, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus channel presented by BuffaloPlus.com. Mike Catalana, Dan Fetes. I am Jenna Cottrell. Guys, it is this week the Bills getting ready for the NFL draft. We know it's the big celebration. It'll be in Cleveland. Mike and I will be there. And Dan going to the dark side with his pick for running back. But we're going to break it all down because we did an entire 7-round Bills mock draft. If you can't
because
tell,
you guys haven't seen enough mock drafts. This week we've got one more for you.
Exactly. I'm a little mad at Mike that we had to do the one, but it's all right.
We have 3 mock drafts for you.
Yes.
Each of us did our own. We went in little different directions.
Yes.
And as we said, as Jenna mentioned, Dan went to the dark side.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll start with you, Mike, because you did pick correctly last year with who the Bills were going to draft.
Yeah, I actually thought they'd get him in the first, before they ended up making the deal. And then eventually they got A.J. Epinesa for defense. Okay, second round pick. It's a little different. It's the way the board ended up working out for them. This year I have him moving up. And I would say labeled this is a bit of a controversial pick because I have him not only moving up to move up to a guy who's had an injury issue and who sat out last year. So those would be 2 things that I think Brandon Beane would normally shy away from. But I have them moving up to 24 with Pittsburgh, dropping, their first round pick and giving up a third for in 2022 in order to get Caleb Farley, the corner from Virginia Tech. I think his talent is undeniable. I think most experts around college football have him talent-wise right up there with Horn and with Surtain. And he falls because of the back, and it is a concern. The Bills would have to be comfortable with it. But, Dan, I think they need a corner, and that guy's a top 10 talent, and they could get him somewhere late in the first round.
Yeah, I think on our last podcast, we talked about how he fits the process, just kind of this quietly confident guy. Obviously, he's battled the injuries, but there's no question his talent. Mike, I think you talked about before some of the back injuries. He's a top 10 pick, possibly. So if he were to fall, I think you're right. I think if he were to fall past 20, I think then the Bills start making some calls to try and jump up there. I'm with you, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. We heard him talk for his pro day, I believe. He talks about, you say quietly confident, Dan. He was not as quiet on his phone call. He was very much talking about how he's the best corner in the draft. He has a lot to prove. And I think, he's a guy that has that chip on his shoulder. And we know how much Sean McDermott loves guys like that. So I could see them making a play for someone like that.
Right. I think this is the position, and Beane's talked about it, that, there's somebody could come in and be a starter. And he hedged a little bit where he said, maybe not day one. And I get all that. Yeah. But with this team, that is an open spot. It is. That second corner spot or third or however many corners are going to be playing is an open spot. So would they make a run at it? We'll find out Thursday.
All right, Dan. Well, let's get into it. Your pick. The shocking pick. I mean, not as shocking.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
If
we're doing this mock draft as to who I would want them to take, it's not this guy. But obviously, there has been plenty of reports linking Clemson running back Travis Etienne to Buffalo. And then as well as earlier this week, Todd McShay goes on the Ryan Russillo podcast, says the Bills are making calls to possibly move up in the bottom of the first round to move up ahead of the Jets who need a running back, possibly the Steelers that need a running back. And I've checked in on one of my sources and they've agreed that the Bills are definitely thinking running back and that Travis Etienne is their number 1 guy. So again, if Brandon Beane wants him, I've said all along, I thought it was 60% trade back, 30% stay, 10% move up. I still think Etienne will be there at 30. And I know this is smokescreen season and everybody wants to talk about how all this stuff is happening. Mike and I were talking about it earlier today. This isn't necessarily getting out from the Bills organization. Mike made a good point when he was talking to me today, saying that this could be the agent. This could be his agent hearing things coming around. And then he talks to Todd McShay, who then is the agent's talking to everybody because he wants him to not go 30. He wants him to go higher because it's more money for everybody. So he's saying, yeah, I don't know, guys. The Jets really like him at 22. They also like him. So I think they go with ETN. I think it's their guy. I also know that there's been, give Devin Singletary another shot. You've spent back-to-back years of third-round picks on running backs. Nobody knows more about Devin Singletary than the Buffalo Bills. They have seen him in a pass-heavy offense. Mm-hmm. They have seen him in a run-heavy offense. And the only way to describe him, guys, is average at best. And I know people were asking me today, like, well, can he do the job? Can he do the job? What job are you asking him to do? Are you asking him to be a middle-of-the-road starter? Yeah, that's fine. But I think ETN is that home run hitter that Beane kind of alluded to that they didn't have in the backfield, guys.
Yeah. And when we heard Brandon Beane talk last week, he said that he was interested or available at looking at running backs who had a different set of skills than what we know Zach Moss and Devin Singletary have. And it just is a little surprising to me, only because, Mike, we've seen Brandon Beane throughout these drafts. He usually drafts defensive guys. It's just the way the board has worked out these last couple of years. But I think of Ed Oliver, and I think obviously, he did take Josh Allen, of course, but like Tremaine Edmonds and guys like that. I just think of this team normally takes a more defensive guy, but I get what the impact would be with.
Yes, you are right in the draft. But then again, keep in mind, they traded a 1 last year to get Stephon Diggs. So they used the 1 in order to get their, second most productive offensive player on the team. I did read somebody, and again, people say nonsense, talking about how the Bills might want to move up. Dan's right. Maybe the Jets are trying to get him, not specifically because it's the Jets, but because a team might want him. Because the person was insinuating that the Bills wanted to keep the player from a rival. You're not using your first round pick on a guy unless you want him. It's not about keeping him from your rival, but they do like his skill set. And this is what I think you need to look at and say, they're not trading up to get a running back. They're trading up to get the running back they want. Right. Yep. So it's the idea of upgrading the position and upgrading what they want. If they're going to go for another running back, okay, think of it just like we've talked about tight end, right? Dawson Knox gives you Devin Singletary production. I look at it.
Backup quarterback, Mike. Matt Barkley was fine. They go out and spend $2.5 million to get Mitchell Trubisky. It's like, you can sit there and say Devin Singletary and Zach Moss are fine. The end. But Mike, we were talking about it. How many carries have we really seen where you go, wow, look at that play by Devin Singletary. Wow. And again, he may be the hardest working guy this offseason. He may have an incredible time and get bigger, fast, stronger. Like, all of those things could be true. But the Bills know what they have. And this has been, there's a lot of smoke. I know that smoke screen season, but there has been smoke for a long time about a running back coming to Buffalo.
Yeah. Smoke's gone. They released him.
That is true. But dad jokes included. All right. So my pick is a little bit different. So I went with an edge rusher. Now, the reason I initially thought we did these earlier in the week. But I didn't have them going for a corner just because I felt like there was more talent in terms of the depth of the corner class. So I figured they would go later on for something like that. But for me, I have Jason Away out of Penn State. He's a guy that, let me get this out there. I know that he did not have a sack last season. I understand that. I understand that also he has an incredible skill set. He's only been playing football since his junior year of high school. And I think because of that, especially at the position, having Mario Addison, having Jerry Hughes, having older guys to learn from, when you look at the skill set and how dynamic, athletic, his ability and what he has, he's also good in the run game as well. I think that there is a possibility that he could be their guy. Now that there's been more reports, we don't really know. But look, the not getting home part, the no sacks, that is something that is not good, obviously. But I think because of that, he will still be available at 30. I have them at 30, not going up and going to get him.
Yeah.
So I think that dictates, obviously, the type of player you get depending on where you're stacked in the draft.
Yeah, I think he's a talent. I think he's a talented player. I think he has a skill set that they like. because he has the speed. I would say like lower stats is one thing. Not getting to the quarterback at all is a little alarming. I would say in your year, it was a strange year in the Big Ten, strange year for Penn State, obviously.
Yes.
They were behind in a lot of games. I don't know if that made a big difference for them, but I keep thinking about different guys. And it's funny that I just said to you about, we were talking about Travis Etienne, and it makes me think of CJ Spiller getting a running back there. And then, you think of the other guys through the years, and I think of a Penn State guy who did well at the combine named Aaron Maben.
Mike, why?
Because it's a Penn State guy who wasn't highly productive, but put up big numbers at the combine.
Wow.
Or at least at his pro day. Yes.
Right. No, and that's the one thing. And I think Jenna makes a good point. And Mike, it's the same thing where it's the crowd of everybody with pitchforks going, you can't take a running back in the first round. And especially that same group gets even more intense when you go, you can't trade up in the first round to get a running back. Brandon Beane has built enough cachet where he can swing for a fence. He can take a Jason Awe and say, it's almost like he's built that capital to be like, hey, I've hit on enough guys. I can take my shot here. Yeah. And if he wants a guy that he can get on the Zoom call after and say, I don't care that he didn't have a sack. This guy's electric. He's our guy. Beane can spin that. Yeah. And, because Awe is 6'5", 250, and is just a freak athlete that could learn a lot from Jerry Hughes and could benefit from Ed Oliver's push up the middle or vice versa. So, I'm with you. Sacks are rather important for edge rushers, but whether it's a running back move, Brandon Beane has some cachet here to do something.
Yeah. There's a lot of good faith there.
Right. Like I mentioned those other guys. Brandon Beane didn't draft those guys, right? I think it was Buddy Nix. We're going back a little bit. So I'm not really worried about that. And I don't think he's thinking about, we brought in a Penn State guy. Like if it was a year before or 2 years before and it was a guy they drafted, because I can go to my guy, it is 2 years later, drafting a guy from the same school, and I have him taking Peyton Turner out of Houston. And you mentioned size. This guy is 6'5", 275, and long arms, and he's got all those skills, which you would want. Imposing guy coming off the edge, a riser too for this last year. I just was looking for skill set, and we did hear Brandon Beane speak of those things. And to Jenna's point, Awe basically is the prototype of what he was as he was describing. Other than Jenna, was he wearing number 20? Was it 26, 28? It's a weird number for. I'd rather see him wear 1. Isn't that a strange number for a pass rusher?
Yeah, it looks weird. It looks weird for sure.
But he is because being described, the kind of guy you want with the strength, the speed, the arms, all those things. So I think in that case, they fit.
Yeah. And also looking at him and his profile of who he actually is as a person. He was a part of the leadership group for Penn State. After them having a tough season, he came out and said that there's no place he would rather be. They're going to get it through it. He wasn't dissing the team. And I know we can sit here and say, okay, that's what you're supposed to say as a teammate. But I think those things really do matter in terms of what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott look at in terms of the makeup of who the player is individually.
Oh, you're right. Oh, I think that matters a lot. I think it does. It is a strange time, obviously, because they haven't had the personal contact as much with these guys. But, they'll know the coaching staff. They'll go over all that. And it's the type of player. Hey, look, Dan, we know this. They need youth at that position because they have 2 guys that are combined 68 years old at the 2 defensive ends.
Older than you.
Wow.
And they're both on the last years of their deals. So that's another thing too.
Okay. I just want you to know I'm not.
No, you're not. You're not 68.
No, I'm not in the last year of my deal.
Mike walked into that one hard.
I said 68. Oh,
I know. You
God.
walked into it. I'm like, usually
could have
everyone
said-
is younger than you.
I could have said they're both old. They're in their 30s.
That's true. That's true. And then I would say you're really old because you're a lot further along than that.
All right, second round.
Yeah, go ahead. What do you got, Dan? Thank you.
I'm gonna go with like Jenna said, the depth at corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna botch his name, but I'll go with the corner out of Syracuse.
Oh, I have him too.
Fatu Melifonwu? Something.
Okay.
Melifonwu. Yep.
Melifonwu.
Fatu
Yeah.
Melifonwu. Yeah, that was not bad.
So I think he's a freak size.
Mhm.
It would just be if they can get him in the second round, it's a steal. And,
I
think
agree
that
with
this
you.
would
I agree.
this could he's another guy that everybody's talking about is flying up draft boards, could absolutely go in the first round.
Mhm.
I think just the fact that he went to Syracuse is going to kind of be a little bit of a knock against him. But again, he was maybe the one bright spot on a bad Orange football team over the last 2 years. He's almost 6'3". He's 250. He runs like a guy that's 5'11". He's got 4.4 speed, absolutely blanket coverage, can kind of do it all. He would be maybe the immediate starter. Like I know Brandon Beane has talked about, we'll think long-term more than short-term when we're trying to find a starter. I think that he would be maybe not week one starter, but I think that by the end of, but if he were on the Bills, I think by the middle of the season, he would be a starter alongside Trey.
Yeah, and Dan, you make a good point about that. Even that, he's projected as a second rounder. So picture this scenario. It's the first round. The Bills are sitting there at 30. They have a list of players. They're trying to trade back, or maybe they do, and they go into the second round and get them. There are times, I believe, when a team says, we'll take him here. Like we could try to trade back. We don't like the deal that's out there. We think somebody else may like him early in the second round. Like, especially this year, I think there's going to be a bit of a wide variety of what people see. And if it's a player, the guy Dan describes is a player they would love on this team. So let's see if it happens. I like the pick.
And
also, one last thing, Jenna. Oh, sorry. I botch everybody's name. So it's not just his. I am atrocious with pronunciation and grammar. So don't take it personally that I couldn't pronounce his name.
Yeah.
Great characteristics for a broadcaster.
Great speller. It's just the combo.
Total
there.
package.
I will agree too with what you're saying, Dan. I also picked him in the second round because I also thought because of that bigger size, it would be such a compliment to Trey White, having a little bit of size. Also, and some notes from him, an aggressive tackler. And like we said, just that bigger frame and what that could do for them. So I feel like
Jenna, what are we going to call him if he becomes a Bill? Like, we got to shorten this up here a little bit. It's got to be something cool.
Melifonwu is very easy to say.
Yeah, but the whole name, we need something cool there. Like, I don't know what he goes. I think the guys on the team have to shorten up that name a little bit.
Yeah, we'll let them do that. Curious.
It's like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. It turns into UPL.
UPL.
Yes, that's true.
And that works.
But actually, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is easy to say. It's just very long, and it's impossible.
Try spelling it. Like nobody calls him Steven Hauschka. He was just Hausch Money. Like like Mike's right. You'd abbreviate it somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need something.
I'm sure it will. We'll just let them do it.
Part of the deal.
All right, Mike, who'd you pick?
Well, I already have my second round pick. So now I made a trade in my third. I made a trade and I traded back. And I acquired, let me see what the guy's name is. The Bills get a fourth round pick and a player
Mike is so excited.
Name of Zach Ertz from the Eagles.
This is why we had to mock 7 rounds, is because Mike wanted to make sure he got this in.
They should have made the deal already, but regardless, it's a deal that makes sense. In fact, I was looking on a Philly podcast and listening to them, and they were going through their picks, and they had a deal between the Bills and the Eagles at the first round, where the Bills drop back, the Eagles move up, and Ertz is part of the deal in another pick. It's going to happen. It's happening this weekend. The Bills move back and they get the tight end that they need in this offense, especially if they go defense with the first 2 picks.
Yeah.
Can we make a coffee bet? Like, can we do something, Mike? Like, this is like, if the Bills don't get Zach Ertz, what are you going to talk about? Or no, actually, that's probably better because then you'll have more content to talk about until the start of the regular season. You
know what it is? If they don't get him, because the Eagles are going to trade him all year, I'm going to be harping on the fact that they should have gotten Zach Ertz.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You're going to will this into existence.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It's going to
You're going to
happen.
manifest this into happening.
Unless
Okay,
New
Dan.
England signs them so they can have a 5 tight end offense this year.
All right, Dan, what do you got?
Well, I'm in the same boat kind of as Mike, because I think that while they couldn't address the tight end position and couldn't upgrade it in free agency, I think they find a piece that they like here in the third round in tight end from Boston College, Hunter Long, 6'5", 250, runs a lot faster than a guy for 6'5". Again, ACC, he was, I believe he was a second-team All-American. He's got a big upside. A lot of people are comparing him to Mark Andrews, a guy that can stretch the seam. That's a big size. And I just think that he's the number 3 tight end in this draft. We know Kyle Pitts is probably going to go in the top 10. And then after that, it's the guy from Penn State. It could be also the guy from Notre Dame. But I just think 6'5" with upside to stretch the field and to become a mismatch at 6'5", I just like that speed and size. My mock draft was all about speed, size, and a wrestler, and we'll get to that later in the pick. But I go, you look at the speed that Etienne would bring, you look at the size of what the cornerback would bring out of Syracuse, and then you would bring more size and speed. Yeah.
It is spelled phonetically.
Yeah, super easy. So
it's
Hunter Long.
It's really not bad.
Hunter Long, okay.
All right, so I went with Kendrick Green out of Illinois. It's a guard/center. So he played both guard and center at Illinois, and I think when we talk about how much you hear the phrase position flexibility with the Bills, obviously we know Mitch Morris, not really sure how long he will be in Buffalo. I know the Bills obviously re-upped John Feliciano, but in case they wanted to move on from him, they would have an option. He's explosive. He has body control. He brings a lot to the table. I hate these words too. If I see oily hips one more time,
greasy hips,
it's just so alarming. Who describes people like this? But yeah, I just think that they need to have that insurance, I feel like, because of these guys, some of them getting older, whether or not they're going to be on the team. And just like I said, flexibility.
You're in the right spot. This draft has a lot of middle of the line players, guards that are mostly considered interior 3, either side guard or a center. And they need that. And, if you really listen to Brandon Beane and just listen to him talk, go back even sometimes a month later, he tells you a lot of things. He's already told us that he needs to look at this overall roster and start filling in some spots, especially next year, cheaper. Yeah. And that could be guys they draft this year, because there's this thought that you draft the guy and then he fits. No. Usually it takes a little while, right? Even a Gabe Davis, how well that has worked out so far, and then what he ends up doing. So there's a lot of moves they're going to make like that because they're going to need to. And they're different than Kansas City at the moment, because Kansas City is like the Brooklyn Nets, basically, where you got like 4 guys you're paying crazy money to and everybody else is going to make nothing. That's basically what the Chiefs are doing. They are banking on big contracts, big money on a lot of guys. And they got Mahomes, and they've already won a Super Bowl. So kind of makes sense. But for the Bills, I think he's sort of trying to do both. So, Jenna, to your idea of the pick, there's either the player you mentioned or a player like him, I think, is going to happen relatively early this weekend.
Yeah. And Dan, you talked about in your article on buffaloplus.com about Josh Allen, what they want to do with him in terms of his contract, and Tremaine Edmonds, and how they're going to need to get cheaper starting players and just to have guys that are a little less, of an impact on the cap space. And because of that, like you said, Mike, too, it's not like these guys who can immediately plug in and play. That's not normally the situation. So you want to kind of draft ahead. And it's so funny because I feel like it is such a cliche this time of year to be like, we're drafting the best guy available. And like, we're thinking long-term. Dan did an excellent GIF of the car, or not even a GIF, but the picture of the car going off the exit. Yeah, a nice meme. But it's true. It's like long-term, these have to be things that are thought about.
Because Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds' contract extensions are going to be pricey, and you already have to look that far down the road. And Beane kind of made the point, and that's why I find it so crazy to think that he would move up in the first round, because he even said it. First round picks are more expensive, not necessarily even in draft capital wise, but they're contract wise because of the slotted pay scale. Like I think that's very tough. And to know that if Beane wanted to trade back in the first round and get a second and a third or something like that, all of a sudden it's cheaper. I don't know. So again, I still think that, again, we're going back to the first round, but I still think it's 60, 30, 10, trading back, staying put, and moving up. I think, I just wonder if ETN goes above where everybody's projecting. And then at that point, the Bills say, all right, maybe they've got 5 guys they really want at 30 that they think realistically. And after that, they pull the ripcord and say, we'll go back.
Yeah. Well, or Dan, you think of it this way too. You need a second corner. Their offense scored 500 and some points last year with those 2 running backs
by throwing the ball.
So by throwing the ball. That's what I'm saying is, so you can score. You can score points. You did it last year. Yeah. They're built to do it again. But that's why I say trading up. If you trade up for a corner or trade up for a pass rusher, that guy's playing, and he's playing right away. And we can use semantics on when the guy becomes a starter, but he's going to play and need to. Not that you wouldn't use the running back and maybe make another deal, but to your point, yes, holding on to those picks because you're going to need that depth for future years.
Yeah, good point as well. All right, let's move on then. Mike, who do you have?
Well, Jenna, you take the pick. You take the pick in the 4th round because we have the same player.
Okay, yeah. So great minds.
The 5th round.
No, 4th round.
They don't have a 4th.
I have them I have them in the 4th.
That's why
I traded back.
Them. So what pick do you have, Matt?
Well, I didn't have a 3rd round pick. So I traded back. I picked up the Eagles pick and they moved back.
Okay. Well, whatever. Regardless, we have Anthony Schwartz out of Auburn, wide receiver. And the Bills have talked about having their fastball, and that has been their stable of exceptional wide receivers, and they want to keep it that way. And when you talk about Schwartz, it is speed, 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 speed. He is a mix of speed and size. I think the Bills could really, really accentuate. And I mean, Mike, why, when we talk about how talented the Bills receiving core is, just think about having that home run threat. I mean, it's like it brings you up even more.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's world-class speed. I mean, he's sort of compared a little bit to, his nickname is Flash, compared a little bit to Marquise Goodwin, who's a former Bill, who's one of the fastest players in the NFL, still one of the fastest. Yeah. And he also is a guy that a lot of people believe can become the slot guy and use that speed on the inside. Again, why is he in the 4th round with that speed playing at an SEC school like Auburn, or in the 5th round, depending on how you look at it? It's because he needs more precision in his routes, needs more work on those specifics. But, you're coming to a team where nobody wants to hear this at the moment, but Cole Beasley has been phenomenal for this team. Mm-hmm. Let's see where he is in another year. The guy takes a beating. This is the way teams operate in the NFL. And it doesn't mean
his kneecap.
Yeah. It doesn't mean this guy, Anthony Schwartz, is going to take over for Cole Beasley. It just means they're going to be looking for guys that can contribute. Mm-hmm. And then at a certain point, we didn't know Gabe Davis was going to be that guy for the Bills in the 4th round. Yep. So moving in there, when you've got the type of players they have around Josh Allen, and anytime Stephon Diggs is on the field, it's going to open things up for people. So I love the speed. I love the fact that he can play on the inside. And I think he's the type of player they might take in order to take a shot at that type of speed in the later rounds, 3rd day picks.
I agree. Dan?
So obviously the Bills, as of right now, I didn't do any trades. I'm not as complex as Mike. But just the fact that the first pick I had in the 5th round, edge rusher out of Tulane by Cam Sample, versatile guy. We know McDermott loves that. Played defensive tackle. They've moved him to the edge. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say I watched all the film on Cam Sample out of Tulane in the American Athletic Conference, but Beane has had some success picking guys out of the American Athletic Conference. We talk about Houston. We talk about Temple. Like they have enough guys in this where he's familiar enough with this conference. And then he had a massive senior day or Senior Bowl by smarter people than me said that his draft stock went from 4th to 5th round and then kind of projected himself into day 2. And whenever that happens, I feel like the players are actually, after that Senior Bowl kind of shine wears off and you sit back down and you're like, yeah, he's probably still a 4th or 5th rounder. So I think he has some time to develop. He's got good size to kind of be able to play both inside and outside on the defensive line. And we know how much they love versatility on that D-line.
Yeah. Yep. It's very true. All right, Mike, let's go to your next pick.
Yeah, I have a safety, James Wiggins. And I went back and forth on him. He's a hitter. He's a tough player. He's a little shorter. We're talking about a guy that's just under 6 feet tall. He almost can play. He's basically a box safety, that type of player. The criticism of him, he comes out of Cincinnati, is he's going to struggle covering tight ends. Well, I would say at 5'11", especially against some of those tight ends, that's not the greatest matchup in the world. But what you do see a lot of times, and we all go to that, is, a lot of times teams will use corners on tight ends. It's funny. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about Kyle Pitts here, but when they do talk about a guy like Kyle Pitts, a guy is so talented and so good athletically that teams just put a corner on him.
Yeah.
Because they're going to cover him with a cover guy. And I know they have the size and all those kind of things. So Wiggins is more of, honestly, it's 5th round. I think he's the kind of guy they're going to look for backup help at safety. Dean Marlowe is gone. And I think it's a guy that can play special teams, a tough hitter, physical, smart player. Just that type of player that I think they take in the middle to late rounds. 5th, I had him in the 5th round, taking Wiggins.
Yeah. Okay.
Jenna?
So I went with Wyatt Hubbard out of Kansas State, the defensive end. So 6'3", 260, solid frame, strength. NFL's Lance Zierlein saying he is NFL ready. And the biggest thing about him is that he was a wrestler in high school. And we all know.
Bingo!
Sean McDermott feels about wrestlers. So when I saw that he wrestled, I literally looked up NFL draft prospects wrestlers. I figured this would be the short list to get candidates that would be a good fit in Buffalo. But we do know how much Sean McDermott loves former wrestlers. He had success in high school. Hubert was ranked 8th in the FBS for his 8.5 sacks in just 10 games this past season. So productive. I think you have some of those characteristics that we talked about. And again,
you can just see McDermott just like at the Zoom, some of that being like,
I can just see McDermott doing his clap. Yeah. He's just clapping on the sidelines, picking after.
Did you guys hear he wrestled? Yeah, I could probably take him. Like, he's pretty good though. Yeah, you know what they say, gritty, blue collar, and you're like, yep, Sean,
disciplined. Yep, yeah. We know Sean McDermott loves a wrestler. You have a wrestler too, Dan, right?
Yeah, my 7th round pick. I did exactly what you did.
Okay.
Googled defensive line wrestlers prospects. For my 2nd, 5th round pick, pick 174 is maybe one of my favorite players that I got to see. Actually looking into some of these guys, everything that you guys talked about, the wide receiver out of Auburn with the speed and the ability to kind of fill that, he's got the speed for the outside, but could fill that slot spot if they needed to. Jalen Darden out of North Texas is electric. 5'8", not even 170.
Oh my gosh.
He had 19 touchdowns this season for the Mean Green.
Wow.
The guy is incredible. Shifty slot guy, would instantly impact the kick return game because he ran kickoffs back. So if you're looking at a guy, Mike, I did exactly what you were thinking. Okay, Cole Beasley, he takes a beating. We've seen Julian Edelman hang it up. Like, guys that are just taking a constant beating. Cole Beasley played with a broken fibula, and then he's like, oh, it's not a big deal, whatever. Also, Isaiah McKenzie. I think this guy could be, I think Jalen Darden could be a guy that could fill those roles in a pinch. Not saying he would start right away. I think he would impact the kick return game, would go right up against Isaiah McKenzie. And then if McKenzie moves on or doesn't have as much of a productive season, you bring in this gadget player again. And like I said, I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill, But again, another guy that when he would step on the field would kind of be that, electric player. Really like him. But not only that, Mike, like we were talking about with the guy from Auburn, needs to be worked on stuff. This guy is a great route runner already, like student of the game. Really, really like this Jalen Darden out of North Texas.
Okay. You sold me, honestly.
Mean Green also. How great of a team name is the North Texas cool. Mean Green?
That's pretty good. All right. We're going to have to check this back after and see how many we hit on.
I'd like to hit one. One guy.
No, people are listening to this. Don't say that.
Well, but this is, it really is the way you need to think about it. Like, okay, let's be honest. If Brandon Beane said, I love Dan's draft, I want this draft, it still won't come out that way.
Yeah.
Because, there are 31 other teams making their moves. And this is where, you do have to react to what everybody else is doing and other players that you didn't think were going to be there, because you do know in every news conference, they're going to say, we couldn't believe he was still on the board when our pick came.
We got our guy. We were looking at him the whole time. If the Jaguars say that about Trevor Lawrence, we know we have a problem. Couldn't believe he was on the board. Okay. Let's go to Dan. We'll go to you.
Sixth round pick.
Go ahead.
Not going to sit here and try and explain every pick here. DeMar Hamlin, safety out of Pitt. Versatile guy. He reminds me a lot, reading up on his draft profile, of Dean Marlowe, about a guy that's 6'2", battled injuries in college, but really good tackler, good instincts. That's all. He's a safety that I think could, again, we talk about guys that aren't going to play right away. And if they draft a safety, you might go, well, what are they doing? They got two of the best safeties in the league. Yeah, they're going to need
long-term.
Yeah, long-term play. Could be a special teamer.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of those guys that are safeties can, depending on the size, can play that big nickel role, which they constantly are trying to fill. And the Bills were in nickel personnel as much or more than any team in the league last year. They love to use it all the time, whether it's the extra corner or even bringing another safety on the field. So, hey, look, they bring a guy in. If the guy can contribute and play, he's going to get on the field. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Dan, I went for, in the 6th round, I went for another sort of gadget guy. He's not quite as short as your guy. I think he's like 5'9" plus. Demetric Felton, running back out of UCLA, kick returner, punt returner. They said he is such a good pass catcher that some think he could transition to a wide receiver. That type of player, scored a bunch of touchdowns for UCLA. Again, this is what you'll see a lot of times in players like this, running back like him, that will be in a later round, that will be available because he's likely not an every down guy. You got to believe you can get other things out of him, play a certain role on a team. But to Dan's point, with Andre Roberts gone and them not really positioning a guy specifically for returns, that's going to be a key thing. That's going to be somebody on the regular roster who's going to be a return guy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. So,
Mike, that guy, Darren Sproles-like kind of thing, is that like, obviously played at UCLA like Chip Kelly? Yeah.
Yeah, a little bigger. I mean, Sproles was 4'6", so Sproles is really short. Like really short. Sproles is what?
But Mike, 5. You talk about that, how we've both picked one of those gadget guys. Like that is the NFL in 2021. You need somebody that can catch out of the backfield. And we've talked about it before. We've harped on this tight end position as that safety blanket or that mismatch. Maybe the mismatch is out of the backfield. Maybe that goes back to Travis Etienne, that we couldn't find that safety blanket to check down. Look, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kansas City, they already had a great tight end and thought, hey, if we get another guy that can catch the ball in the backfield and make people miss and turn a incompletion into a 4-yard, 5-yard gain by dumping it off, that's a huge bonus to the offense. So I like where you're thinking there, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a little more offense. And again, that is, I didn't have them picking a running back any other place. So it's another back, and keep in mind they signed Matt Breida too, as another quick guy that can catch the ball and can make some plays. So he'll get an opportunity too. Again, there's the cases if they don't go for a back in any real form this way, it does open up those opportunities, and maybe they look elsewhere for a playmaker.
Yeah, agreed. So I also went with a running back, but I did something a little different.
Oh.
So I said, let's have some fun. I picked Jared Patterson, obviously out of UB.
Yeah.
Now, look, he is a bowling ball that runs right at you. He had, the record, tied the FBS single season record with 8 touchdowns in a game. Look, the Bills just had to walk outside and look out and see how many touchdowns he was running right in their backyard. I think he's a guy that you look at some of their profiles, and the word that kept coming up the words were work ethic, competitive, things like that. So I know that character piece, like we talked about earlier. He's 5'7". There's questions about how he'll be able to translate being a shorter, smaller guy. But again, I think what I was thinking too is when we talked about Devin Singletary and Zach Moss being thunder and lightning, obviously there were more similar sets of skills than what we initially thought. So maybe they do want to add in that thunder piece. But I thought it would be fun too. Obviously, as a Buffalo guy, Western New York, a product in terms of that. So I went with Jared.
I think he can play. I think he can make a roster.
I do too. Yeah.
I really think that he was productive enough, able to run in between the tackles. Got to see him enough, covering enough UB highlights and stuff like that. I mean, I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire kind of helps his success, kind of helps Patterson a little bit, just like how I think Josh Allen's success helps Trey Lance. I just think some of that stuff where you're like, I don't know if that really translates, and then you're like, well, this guy did it, so you can kind of say, here's one of them.
Yeah, that example, having that for people to look out for. Okay, Mike, your last pick.
7th round. I referred to this as a Sean McDermott pick. It's corner. His name is Mark Gilbert out of Duke. Described as smart, tough, and coachable. How's that for his description? He is a cousin to Darrelle Revis.
Oh, okay.
He is his uncle is Sean Gilbert, former Rams defensive lineman, was like the 5th pick in the draft one year. So he's got the bloodlines. He's a worker, he's got that whole thing. Team guy, that first in, last out type of guy. Got off to a really good start in his career. Duke had an injury. He's got size too. He's over 6 feet. I mean, I think he's the kind of guy that can play. It's funny. That 7th round seems to be that spot where like guys have a lot of traits of 1st and 2nd round picks. Like you look at the size, the weight and stuff, and then you're like, what is it? What is it? Is it production? Is it injuries? Is it whatever it is? And the guy, it happens a lot with quarterbacks because teams will grab a guy in the 7th round. Like, oh, we have another guy. And you look at him, the guy's 6'4", 240, gun of an arm, can move. And you're like, why is he going in the 7th round? So it's funny to see that. Usually the guys that go in the 2nd and 3rd maybe have one trait that is slightly different. These guys, again, it was an injury. He's playing at Duke. It's a little different story, but he'll be, they'll bring him in. He'll be a McDermott guy, and he'll be starting week 3.
It's funny you wrote it like that because I had for mine, I said Cameron Bynum out of Cal. And I literally wrote Bynum is a Sean McDermott guy, a 2-time captain, 4-year starter at Cal. NFL Lancer line notes, scouts rave about his personal character. He's disciplined, good instincts, and projected to fit into a zone-heavy scheme. So, yeah, I feel like when you look at that and just the personnel in terms of, or not personnel, but personality. Yeah. Especially, I feel like you do have to really look at a guy's character, especially in those later rounds, because all of these guys we know are naturally athletically gifted. But it's like, I think a huge piece of that is learning to become a pro and learning to really hone in on your craft. Dan, who'd you pick?
Roy Lopez III out of Arizona, 2-time Arizona high school wrestling state champ.
There it is.
Long curly hair flowing out the back of the helmet. Nice. Dad was a high school football coach, coached him, like all the traits that Sean McDermott will absolutely mention if he gets picked. So yeah, okay. I Googled defensive line, wrestler, draft prospect.
I mean, are we talking Dawson Knox curls here?
No. No, much more
Long?
yes.
Like Troy Polamalu? Like, are we talking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly
Okay.
who I'm
Okay.
thinking.
Okay. Interesting. Ooh, okay. All right. Well, Mike, why don't you tell them about Thursday for us?
Well, one quick thing I wanted to mention. There is an interesting dynamic as we get to these later rounds that a lot of people have been talking about, that there's not as many players in this draft, and it's considered more top heavy. And these later rounds is going to be really interesting. I think you're going to see a flurry of moves where the teams that have a bunch of picks are going to be trying to trade to get picks next year, which is supposed to be, the idea was because they gave these players an extra year in college based on the pandemic. So a lot of players who were later round picks decided to go back for another year. And the amount of players in this draft is lower than it's been. So it's an interesting way you look at the later rounds. So I think in these late rounds, teams are going to be trying to maneuver a little more for quality, not quantity, and then signing some guys, as they always do, that are free agents and using those picks elsewhere, whether it's using 2 7s to move up to a 6 or 2 7s and a 6 next year to get another one. Like they're going to do, I think you're going to see a lot of those deals. And then next year, teams are going to want to get as many picks as possible because I think it's going to be that deep of a draft, the 7 rounds next year. Anyhow, that was just one other thing I wanted to mention as we're talking about these late rounds. We're going to be out in Cleveland. We're going to be there for the first round. We've had pretty good luck in being there when the Bills draft a guy. It's going to be tough this year because there's limited players that are going to be there. But Caleb Farley's going to be there. So if my pick comes through, maybe we'll be talking to him. But we'll be out there. We've got Let's Talk Football live at 7:30. Well, 7 o'clock we're going to be on all of our online platforms. And then at 7:30 on 13 Wham ABC, the 3 of us on there getting you ready for the draft. We break down every position. This is not our mock drafts. This is a look at big position groups that we think the Bills may be targeting. And Dan, we're going to be talking about that AFC East and everybody chasing the Bills.
Yeah.
It could be a lot more fun after Thursday.
Yeah.
Zach Wilson. And like I said, there is a lot of chatter about New England moving up to whether it's take Justin Fields or Trey Lance. And I know, Mike, I think we were talking about it on the phone the other day, that everybody wants to talk about that Bill Belichick has never drafted a quarterback in the first round. Yeah, it's a lot easier to do that when you've had Tom Brady for 20 of those years. He didn't really want to waste a first-round pick on a quarterback that wasn't going to play. So, yeah, I think that Bill Belichick didn't spend the highest money, the most money ever in free agency to pay Cam Newton backup money and to try and do this again. I think there's a move. Very interesting tidbit. We know the 5 quarterbacks that are probably looking to get drafted. Okay. Vegas has the over-under for amount of quarterbacks that get taken in the first round at 5.5.
Oh,
so whether that's another quarterback that gets snuck in the back half of this first round, which we know happens a lot with Lamar Jackson, teams wanting up to get that pick. And Brandon Beane said that he'd be stunned if his phone wasn't ringing at pick 30 because we've seen so many moves there. But just an interesting thing, whether that's
Kyle Trask.
Or the guy out of Stanford is another one.
Davis.
He was one of the number 1 high school recruit quarterbacks. Obviously only played a couple of games with the Pac-12 and how weird that was. But apparently New England likes him, is eyeing him in the second round. Do they move up in the first round to get him? Look, mock draft guys and all these analysts do the best that they can. The McShays and the Kuipers and all those guys. Vegas is also really good too, and they don't build those big, tall, shiny buildings off losers. So very interesting there that they set it at 5.5. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, and like we can also talk about how much that affects the Bills and what they do, considering how many picks are going to be quarterbacks and what that does for other position players. It's going to be really fun. We really hope you join us. We're also going to be posting, if you follow on Instagram, I'm going to do some behind the scenes stuff of what we're seeing as well. Make sure to follow us all on Twitter too. We're always tweeting about the Bills.
And we will and we'll be updating after the picks. We'll be on giving our comments on the picks, what the Bills are doing as we get through each portion. The days, it focuses a lot on the first round, but especially Friday is going to be huge for this franchise too. That second and third round pick. So we'll be here on Buffalo Plus the whole time.
Yeah. And Dan made a really good point in his article about how, as important as the first round draft pick is, Dan, why don't you kind of say about those later picks and what they mean for the team?
Yeah, like this first round pick is not going to make or break the Bills this season. Whoever the Bills draft at 30th, or if they move up, I don't think they're the difference maker that make the Bills Super Bowl favorites or increase their odds in any bit. Josh Allen is the difference maker of why they are favored to win the division, why they are favored to go up against Kansas City again, probably in the AFC Championship. But the picks that Brandon Beane makes, whether it's the second, the third, trading into the fourth or in the fifth, like they've done with Matt Milano or Gabriel Davis or Tyler Bass, those are going to be the guys to see if they consistently are expected to win double-digit games. Yep. So that's why, you look at the first round is exciting, but Brandon Beane wants to consistently pick 30th or 31st or 32nd. Yeah. Like that's what he wants to do. This is the lowest they've ever drafted in franchise history, and he wants this to be something that he does consistently. And I hope I love anything. No, actually I do. I do love my daughter and my wife as much as Brandon Beane loves his board.
Good catch.
Yeah, I caught myself there. He loves his board. And he must love his board the way that I love my daughter and my wife, because it's like you set your board and you just trust the board. You just listen to the board and you set it and then you listen to it and then that's it. Like he makes drafting sound so easy.
Yeah.
But that'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
I just picture Brandon Beane like taking a miniature little board with him to sleep at night, like how most kids have like a blanket or something. Just like
Dan, does he like his board as much as you like first inning no run games?
Guys, I'm 2-7 right now. Not good.
Oh, so they're making all those shiny buildings in Vegas off of you.
It's tough to do, to say that there's been 9 games. I bet no run to be scored in all of them in the first inning, and 7 of them have scored runs. So that's fun.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, we're going to leave that at that. All right. Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and subscribe. Again, follow us on Twitter. Pardon?
We'll see them Thursday.
We will see you all on Thursday. I got scared for a second. Like, comment, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, all of that good stuff. We always appreciate the comments and the feedback. For Mike and Dan, I am Jenna. We will see you on Thursday at the NFL Draft in Cleveland. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.